what ended up happening was around 4:00. Some porters came, some people that had been with us, and they came and literally carried me out. They kind of had to get me down the glacier first. That took a long time. But once we got down to the end of the glacier, there was like this thing called a dandy. And so you sit in like a chair and there's these poles come out. So 4 people carry you. It was an interesting experience because it was a cloudy night. It was a new moon, so there was no light. And they were walking me down this mountain path at some points with just a sheer rock face on one side. The path was like 1.5 meters, and then on the other side dropped down into a river. And like I said, there was no light. And so I was just like, oh Lord, somebody's going to fall, somebody's going to trip, and I'm going to fall down into the river, which is 200 meters below. And so talk about that for me was like a real test of faith, patience, and just practice letting go. I think I had at that point understood the practice of just surrendering and letting go.
Hello, my name is Sabine Quenberg, founder and host of Become. The content will inspire you to reach your aspirations and become the best version of yourself. I feature interviews with successful individuals from various industries, delving into their personal and professional journeys and their strategies to achieve their goals. We have to become the person we are meant to be first, so we can live the life we are destined to live. That means we must overcome challenges and work through difficult times to learn, grow, and become the new, more fabulous version of ourselves. I'm so glad that you're here. Let's get on this journey together. My guest today is Yogi Aaron, and he is a trailblazer at heart. He journeyed from the wilds of Canada to New York City to the sacred Himalayas and untamed jungles of Costa Rica. You will learn from him what the number one yoga pose is that we should avoid, then the yogic muscle activation techniques that will help us be pain-free. And of course, we will listen to his story of how he survived a freak accident in the Himalayas where his leg was crushed by a boulder. Ooh, that doesn't sound so good. But before we go there, first of all, welcome, Aaron.
Thank you so much. I was just thinking that's a long list of things to talk about.
So yeah, we got to cram everything in.
Thank you for having me.
But believe me, I'm sure that the number one question that is on everybody's mind is, how can we stay young and pain-free, right?
Yes.
But I'm sure you can give us a couple of tips for that.
Absolutely.
But before we start, why don't you briefly summarize who Aaron is and how did you get started? Or how did you start your yoga journey?
As you mentioned in the bio, I grew up in northern Canada, and I was accustomed to dog sledding, snowshoeing, cross-country running, skiing, volleyball, ice hockey, soccer, football. And I, by the time I was 18, I had enough awareness, internal awareness and external awareness to realize that my body was tightening up. And if I didn't do something about it, I would become like my grandparents. And that wouldn't be a bad thing characteristically wise, but my grandfather, constantly walked around with a hunchback, and, he needed to move his whole body just to look over his shoulder. And I just realized like that for me was what old age was. Everybody has sort of an idea what old age is. For me, old age at 18 was the awareness or was the limitation of movement in the body. And that's what kind of got me into yoga. I kind of equated yoga with stretching, as most people do. And for me, stretching equated youthfulness, staying young, and also health. So that's how I got into yoga. The short story.
Oh, all right. Yeah, no, actually, it's very interesting that you said that. And you did this in a very young age, actually, because oftentimes when we get older and all of a sudden, oh, it hurts and I cannot move so well. What can I do? Right.
Yes.
So good for you that you started early.
Yes.
So you mentioned you grew up in Canada,
Yes.
right? So what inspired you to do all the travels that you did?
There's probably a couple of things. Growing up, I didn't grow up in a very well-off family. I grew up in a family that was very modest. I had wartime, parents who had parents from the war. And so people that I think grew up in that area grew up very, I don't know if this word translates in German, but frugal, like always kind of thrifty and watching the pennies. And so my mother also said, I'm not going to pay for my kids to go, on a big trip because they're not going to appreciate it. And I think that kind of holding me back made me even want to travel more. And my mother was very much into New Age by the time I got into my teens, creative visualization, looking at photos and imagining yourself to become that person. And one of the photos or things that I had on my vision board was this beautiful tropical beach. Well, guess where I live now.
Tell us where you live now.
So I would say that by the time I turned 22, it was like I was unleashed. And by the time I got into my 30s, like I travel a lot now. I travel as much as I possibly can because I believe that the best education is in the world, not at home, like when we get out in the world.
I couldn't agree more. We have a lot in common in that respect. I loved to travel. I think I got it from my mother. She always wanted to have a vacation,
Mm-hmm.
at least once a year. But once I started becoming an actress, and then I was really traveling because I was playing in different cities. But then I even wanted to do more. So I ended up working in Africa. And what you just said is so important. We cannot even fathom how other people think or nations think if we don't immerse ourselves into their culture once in a while, or at least observe and be there. You don't have to necessarily immerse yourself,
Yes.
but at least be there that you can understand. So I know what you're saying.
I like to get myself challenged and be uncomfortable. And, like I remember the first time I went to, I think it was Thailand, and they didn't flush toilet paper down the toilet. My friend said, no, you put it in the garbage. And I was just like, what? And so, and then also too, like Thai people use different ways to go to the bathroom. And I just thought, and that's just like one example, I could pull out 100 more, but that kind of like, it goes against what I normally would do. And so that kind of challenges me to see the world differently, different perspectives and different customs and understanding why they are. And that's one of the reasons why I love traveling the most.
Yes.
So I can get uncomfortable.
Right. It's so interesting that you said Thailand. Before we kind of quote unquote settled down to start our business, a performing arts school, we had like one big trip backpacking through Thailand. And that was one of the most memorable trips that I did, going through the jungle via elephant and sleeping literally on wood planks just with a straw mat,
Yes.
going to the bathroom into the poppy fields. So yes, you have different perspective. And also when I was in Africa, I remember going to a concert. It was like in a village, and there was the bathroom literally just was a hole in the ground.
Yes.
So it was like, oh, I don't know. Yeah. So, well, enough of the bathroom talk here. So tell me, where do you live now?
I live in Costa Rica now. That's where I call home.
Nice, nice. But I'm really interested to learn about the trip that you did, and I believe that when we get into very challenging situations where we think, okay, how can we get out of it? We'll learn quite a bit, and that's what I love with this podcast. Is really when I talk with different individuals, they all have different stories and we
Mhm.
can learn so much from it. So if you don't mind sharing your story when you were really crushed or your leg was crushed, where were you? How did it start? And how did you get out of it?
I got out of it by the grace of God. One of my greatest passions is to take people to India. I love leading yoga retreats. I've been doing it for almost 20 years now. And that's why I started a yoga retreat center. And one of the places I love bringing people is India, and especially up in the Himalayas. And one of those trips, I brought a group of people up to this place. If you look at a map, you can find it. It's called Gungo Tree. And it's spelled almost just like it sounds. And it's up deep in the Himalayas, and it's one of the points where the Ganga starts. So there's, like, you see like the Gomukh glacier, and there's kind of like about 4 different points where water feeds in, and it really supplies water to all of India. I took a group up there, and we went right to the very top, which was around 6,000 meters up. So it was very high up. Actually, maybe more like 5,500 meters up. And we spent the night there, and then coming down that next morning, we were coming down the mountain, and I looked up, someone in the group looked up, and they yelled out really loud, "Watch out, there's a rock coming." And I looked up too late, and as I turned around to try and move, it hit me right in my femur bone. And, it's a very interesting sensation because I think I was actually in denial that the leg broke for about 3 days. It wasn't until I saw the x-ray and my femur was like literally in half. It wasn't only in half, it was like, parallel with each other. It just moved in that way. And, but at that moment, I didn't know how I was going to get down the mountain. We were 26 kilometers from the cars. So
Whoa.
it was quite a long ways. And I had prayed or hoped or thought that a helicopter would come for us because there was an Indian air base that was very close to us. And we just assumed, or I just assumed, like, oh, they, somebody in danger in the mountain, they would go and rescue them. No, there's too much bureaucracy, too much red tape, too much, oh, we need permission, blah, blah, blah.
Oh my gosh. So how did you get out? I mean, it's painful when you break your leg.
Yeah.
You cannot walk.
No. And every time we tried to move me, we didn't realize that the bone was, severed in half and kind of, like this. And we didn't know that. So anytime I moved, it was, I can't even begin to tell you torture. It was very torturous. And what ended up happening was it was around 3:00 in the afternoon. The sun actually started going down behind the mountains. The temperature was dropping rapidly. The only thing, all of our clothes went ahead with the porters. And so there was a very solid moment when I thought this could be it, because there was no fire there was no wood for the fire, that we had no clothes. All of our clothes went ahead. So
Can I ask you real quick, trying to get this together. So you were with 25 people there that you were leading.
yes.
Then you could not walk. So did just a couple people stayed behind with you and the rest moved forward to get help?
Yeah, we basically sent everybody with the exception of 4 people, I think 3 or 4 people. And those people went ahead to try and run ahead and get help and organize it. And then there were some, weaker people in the group as well. So I just wanted everybody to get safe and some of the stronger people in the group stayed with me. What ended up happening was around 4:00. Some porters came, some people that had been with us, and they came and literally carried me out. They kind of had to get me down the glacier first. That took a long time. But once we got down to the end of the glacier, there was like this thing called a dandy. And so you sit in like a chair and there's these poles come out. So 4 people carry you. It was an interesting experience because it was a cloudy night. It was a new moon, so there was no light. And they were walking me down this mountain path at some points with just a sheer rock face on one side. The path was like 1.5 meters, and then on the other side dropped down into a river. And like I said, there was no light. And so I was just like, oh Lord, somebody's going to fall, somebody's going to trip, and I'm going to fall down into the river, which is 200 meters below.
Wow.
And so talk about that for me was like a real test of faith, patience, and just practice letting go. I think I, at that point, understood the practice of just surrendering and letting go.
Yeah. What else can you do, right? Because in that moment, faith and accepting what it is and just being in the positive state.
Yes.
So, but obviously you survived it. You are here now. I'm so glad for that. But those are those trials and tribulations that really, I would say, mold us a little bit and define us and have a new appreciation of life. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, there was a moment when I thought this could be it. I could be on this glacier and I'll just freeze tonight, or go into deep shock or something. And I think after that, I came out and I was like, I want to live my life even more now. I mean, I felt like I had lived a life well lived. And that was something I had to come to peace with. Like, have I lived? Even if I got out of the situation, okay, there was the thought, like, maybe I'll never walk again. And so, that was kind of like a moment when I had to really reflect on my life and be joyfully acceptable or appreciative of the life that I had lived to that moment. But then once I got out of it, it was like, okay, who do I really want to be in this world? And how do I want to manifest my purpose? And I think that kind of attuned me a lot more into what does it mean to live a more purposeful life, as you said in the very beginning, to be the better version of ourselves.
Let me hop in here real quick to share something with you. Have you ever tried to build your own website, start a newsletter, or build a course and charge for it? Have you ever wanted to make money online but are totally confused by all the different systems you need to have? That's why I use Kajabi. Kajabi is the most popular system for online marketers, coaches, thought leaders, and influencers. Kajabi helps online entrepreneurs take off. Over 100,000 of us use Kajabi and have made over $4 billion. Why not be part of it? The best thing is you don't have to figure out tons of systems or crazy technology to start your online business. Kajabi helps you do all of that, and it's all on one platform. That's why I use it. It makes my life so much easier, and I can even earn money while I'm sleeping. You can build your web pages, blogs, and membership sites. You can create offers, checkout pages, and collect money. You can host your videos. You can start your newsletter list, capture emails, start your marketing funnels, all in one place. It makes it fun and easy with awesome tutorials and support. Since I've joined Kajabi from the beginning, I have a special affiliate link that I would like to share with you. A 30-day free trial. So nothing to lose, but everything to gain. Just go to my link that's in the show notes, sabinekevenberg.com/resources, and we will redirect you to the free trial page. And if you are just starting out and want to get your offer out for sale in just 3 days, let me help you do that. Visit my webpage, by the way, that I built on Kajabi, and apply to making it happen. So now let's get back to the show. All right. And that's what you do today. Now, tell us what you do. I know you were originally wanting to go a different path down the medical field, but you ended up becoming a yoga instructor. So tell us how this happened.
Well, I mean, as I mentioned, I got into yoga when I was 18. I don't think I ever had it in my mind to be a yoga teacher. I kind of looked at yoga teachers back then as people who were kind of weird and goofy and kind of like a little freakish, and because they're always into incense and not wearing deodorant and, all of these kind of things. So, I kind of looked at that kind of weird. But what happened was there was kind of two things that happened simultaneously. The first thing that happened was I was working in a kind of health center with an acupuncturist, and he gave me a room where I could see clients. And so one day I was looking in the room and I thought I could fit 5 people in here and teach a yoga class. And it would be like a way of doing a private, but not a private. And so I just started doing yoga classes like that. And I remember the moment after my first class, I thought, this is something I'm really good at. And I could kind of reinvent what yoga is. So that was the first thing that happened. The second thing is I went to LA to take classes with my teacher, Brian Kess. And the way that he was teaching yoga was transmitting kind of like a practical approach to how do we live yoga in the modern world. And I felt like I had lived my whole life up to that point to be in that class and hear that, because everything he was saying was things that I kind of talk about or had talked about. And that, like right there, was that I am going to be a yoga teacher and change people's lives with this message. And so that's how I kind of got into it.
And so what is the one yoga technique we should avoid, or the one yoga exercise?
One yoga posture. Well, I kind of have to, before I kind of answer that question, I kind of have to tee it up a little bit, because on my yoga journey, and I'll be really brief because I can be long-winded, but I'll be really brief, that on my yoga journey, I've come to learn that stretching is actually not good for you. And it's not only not good for you, it debilitates us and makes us weaker. That's the short answer. And I also kind of simultaneously was starting to look at a lot of yogic teachings, and nowhere in any yoga scriptures does it say you should stretch or that you need to be flexible. So with those kind of two things in mind, I have started coming up with a different approach to yoga where we're flipping the script on stretching and flexibility. But one of the most debilitating postures I've come to realize is child's pose. And so child's pose is one of like those postures where we go into it every single yoga class, and yet we're not considering the horrible ramifications and detriment that it's actually having on our body at a kind of neuromuscular level. And so we look at like a lot of yoga people, they're constantly getting injured. They're constantly having shoulder pain, neck pain, lower back pain. They go into yoga to fix some of these things, and maybe they get some relief, but then they end up causing a lot of other problems. And child's pose is at the top of that list.
And why is that? I mean, I know the child pose, and it's actually very comfortable.
Yeah.
So why is that?
Yeah, a lot of people get heartbroken when I say that, because of course it's their favorite pose. But neuromuscularly, so the problem is with stretching generally is that when we stretch, we end up pushing muscles beyond what their normal range of motion is. And so our brain is constantly connected to muscles, right? And dictating, we can only go this far in this range. So if I bring my arm up and I can only bring it up this far, if I take my other hand, I can push my arm back. And so then I push that arm beyond what its capacity is. As soon as we start to push the body beyond a range of motion, in other words, we stretch.
Mm-hmm.
What happens is that proprioception between the brain and the muscle is gone. And so when the brain is trying to tell muscles to engage or contract, then it doesn't know what muscles to tell. It doesn't know where to send those messages, because it's kind of like you can imagine a telephone line between our brain and our muscles. When we stretch, we cut. It's like taking a pair of gardening shears to that telephone line. When we do child's pose, it compromises like basically 4 major muscle groups in the body, and that you no longer have stability in those muscle groups. So if you want to be stable, if you want to stay young, if you want to, have mobility, don't do child's pose. If you want to be in pain and stay in pain, do lots of child's pose. And I'm speaking from personal experience because, of course, I was in pain in my lower back. And when I actually got to a point where I ended up in a surgeon's office, an orthopedic surgeon who wanted to do a spinal fusion in my lower back. And so I had to really do some investigation to what were the poses that were causing that problem? What were the movements that I was doing? And then that kind of led me into understanding muscle function and this whole idea that our brain is constantly talking to muscles, and our muscles are actually talking to our brain as well in turn.
Yeah, I also know that Tai Chi is very good because it's a constant
Yes.
movement. And one of my
Yes.
instructors for pain-free living is don't hold your poses, but keep on moving, because it's all
Yeah.
those tissues and fascia and all the stuff that needs to be mobilized. When you do something abrupt, it gets
Yes.
stuck.
Yes. Tai Chi is an incredible movement. I personally haven't practiced it that much, but the little that I have, it's a fantastic, way to move. And if you look at a lot of, especially Asian people who are doing Tai Chi, there's a lot of youthfulness. And in Asian kind of culture, they're very obsessed with kind of things that make them young, traditionally. And
Right.
so Tai Chi, it makes a lot of sense. And you watch a lot of Asian people doing Tai Chi. Yeah, a lot of Asian people live to be very old. I think we need to pay attention.
Exactly. That's what we have to do. And for me, I'm a very active person, and I used to
Yeah.
be a dancer. So we always had to stretch, right, to get into the split and whatnot. So it was
Yes.
painful. Um, but I also know now that, yeah, and back then, Tai Chi is like, oh, it's way too slow for me. I need to have action. But now I see it a little bit differently. So, what do you do now? You do yoga retreats, is that right?
I lead actually yoga teacher training immersions. I teach people the applied yoga anatomy and muscle activation philosophy, the Ayama philosophy, and that's my big passion project right now. I also own a yoga retreat center in Costa Rica, where we put together different programs and have other yoga teachers come and lead yoga teacher trainings and yoga retreats and yoga vacations as well.
Yeah. So, if somebody wants to get in touch with you because, oh, I would like to go to Costa Rica and do a yoga retreat, how can they do that?
Well, I suggest people go to my website, yogiaaron.com. That's YOGIAARON.com. And there they can access my pain-free series. So I have a free series on how to become pain-free. It's sort of an introduction to what I'm doing. And then also they can get access to other things and see my retreat center and all the programs that I'm offering and that sort of thing. So I suggest
Wonderful.
people to check me out there, and it's kind of a gateway into everything I'm doing.
fantastic. And I'll make sure to put it in the show notes. Thank you so much, Aaron, for being here and sharing your story and give us a few tips on how we can stay younger and pain-free. And as you mentioned, people can get more of it when they get in touch with you. That was my interview. And if you enjoyed it, give us a 5-star review, leave a comment, and share it with your friends. Thanks for listening. Until I see you again, always remember, serve from the heart, follow your passion, and live the life you imagine.